Well, welcome back to another week of North Point Online. We're glad that you're here. Got to tell you, I've been the last 2 or 3 months, I have experienced for the first time in our 28 years of living in Texas, I'm experiencing allergies, and they're just really bad. And so I'm going to tell you this up front. I may cough a little bit or sneeze through this. I've decided to power through. I've waited till as long as I really possibly can to record this week. So I'm going to ask you to excuse me ahead of time, or if my voice gives out or whatever. But it's just, I guess, part of living in the great state of Texas. You know, I've said this a lot of different times in a lot of different ways. I grew up believing that being a Christian and having a seat at the table in God's big house, what got communicated to me when I was young was this was all about right and wrong, being right or being wrong. Some of you might remember the little children's song. I hope we don't do it anymore, but be careful, little hands, what you do. Be careful, little hands, what you do. The Father up above is looking down in love. Yeah. Be careful, little hands, what you do. And so was this, from the very beginning, it was all about doing the right thing and avoiding the wrong thing. I assimilated that way of thinking into my faith experience. I'm not telling you that was entirely wrong, but boy, when that is your foundation, you've got to be really careful. Because I grew up believing that knowing all the right answers was the goal, believing the right things, staying away from the wrong people, avoiding the wrong behaviors, being part of the right religion, or being part of the right church. Not having any wrong thoughts or wrong intentions, and ultimately not ending up in the wrong place when I die. That was the framework of my faith growing up. Now there were wonderful people and loving experiences and all of that went along with that. But when I peel it all back and I look at what the foundation was that was laid, that was one that was deep inside of me. And it wasn't until later in life that I began to understand that being a follower of Jesus was more, like so much more, than following a list of rules and believing the right set of information, as important as that is. And yet, somewhere along the line, I began to be taught and grab onto the idea that something brand new was beginning to take place in my life. Something brand new was going to replace this old structure, give me something brand new that had freedom that I had never really experienced. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the love chapter, one of the most famous chapters in the Bible, the very last verse in that chapter says, "And now these 3 remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love." Oh my goodness, that sounds so good at a wedding. It looks so great, cross-stitched up on and framed on our wall. Man, I got to challenge you. Let's go deeper. Now these 3 remain. What that means is that when everything else has crumbled, when all of our worst fears have been realized, when all seems lost, Paul says 3 things will always remain: faith, hope, and love. And then he says this, and the greatest of these is love. You don't think this whole Christian thing is about love? let me challenge you to rethink just a little bit. Check out, I had so many verses that I was going to put up, but I'll just kind of limit it here to two of them. Out of the same book of the Bible, the book of Galatians, Paul wrote that. And the first verse is this. Look at it. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Whoa. The only thing? The only thing that counts? I don't know. I don't think Paul's making a mistake here. I think the mistake is our understanding. And then he writes just a few lines further down in verse 14, this most astounding line in the Bible, where he writes, for the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command, love your neighbor as yourself. Do you realize the extreme nature of what he just said? The entire law is fulfilled in one command, love your neighbor as yourself. Paul was actually writing of the place of the right and wrong in the life of the follower of Jesus. That was the context that he was writing about in Galatians. And who would know better than the Apostle Paul? And then it's like he blows it completely out of the water by saying that loving your neighbor sums up the entire law. Now, I'm not going to go deep into this right here, but I got to remind you, we've studied this many times through the years. There are 613 individual commandments in the Torah, God's rule book in the Old Testament, where all of the first believers came out of, where the foundation of our faith was laid, was in God's relationship with the Jews and the right and wrongness of life as it was expressed and taught in the teachings of the Torah and the 613 commands. How can one commandment be the entire law? How can one single commandment sum up the entirety of all of the laws? It's because love expresses the totality of God's will for our lives. But it's not just any kind of love. And we got to remember this. Said this 100 different ways through the years. I'll say it this way today because it's what came to my mind. I love baseball. I love loud rock and roll music. And I love all of the Rocky movies. The greatest of all cinematic efforts. We can debate that. But I love them all. Is that love that I have for baseball and loud rock and roll music and Rocky movies, is that love from God? Yeah. Think about it. Here, I'll give you something really uncomfortable. Pedophiles say that they love kids. That's not love. People love their jobs enough to ruin their marriages. Is that love? Kids, probably throughout all time, have said, if you really love me, you'll have sex with me. Is that really love? The reality is this: people of all faiths, any faith, no faith at all, they can love. And they always have, and they will continue to do it. Their love can be real and genuine and life-affirming. Love of various styles and degrees clearly exists in our world probably falls under the category of God's common grace for anybody. For anybody. We are all part of His creation. Many of those loves are good and healthy and productive. But we have to remember this. There is a different kind of love. There's a different kind of love. We read this verse last week. We'll look at it again. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down His life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. Look, this is a unique, well-defined, objective kind of love. It is a love greater than all other loves. It is love as God loves. It is love as we see expressed in the life and death of Jesus. It's what we would call Christ-like love. It is selfless and life-giving, and it has the power to change hearts and point people in a new direction. And I'm just scratching the tip of the iceberg on the greatness of this love that was given to us by God. It is why Jesus said He was giving a newer and greater command, which was for us to love each other. It's why He answered the rich young ruler when he asked Jesus, what is the greatest of all of the commandments? And Jesus answered by saying, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. It's that kind of love that welcomes people into God's big house. It is that kind of love that makes room for others at the table of fellowship and at the table of communion. Because it's there at the table of fellowship, the table of communion, that we remember God's love for us, rescuing us, saving us, pouring His love inside of us so that we can be His ambassadors of love in a world that is just dying every day a little bit more. It's His love expressed through His Son on the cross. And that's what we remember when we share communion together. Until next time, see you.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures of faith, never enough. You came along, put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing God of the mountain. He's the God of the valley. And there's not a place of mercy and grace find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn morning dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn